Hey, it's Keira. After 28 years, my stepson called me ugly in front of everyone at my engagement. Can you believe that? I spent decades giving everything to this family, sacrificing my dignity, my dreams, for what? To be humiliated like this. But that ring on my finger, that was my answer to him. My silence, that was my power. But now I'm not holding back anymore. It's time to reclaim what's mine. What will happen next? Stay tuned. The room was buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of background music. The venue was elegant, upscale, and so typical of what one might expect for such an occasion. The engagement party was finally here, a moment I had waited for with such hopeful anticipation. My stepson, Jamal, was about to step into a new chapter of his life, and I was meant to be a part of it. For once, I thought, maybe the years of being there for everyone would finally be acknowledged. But what do they say about the best-laid plans? There was something hanging in the air tonight, something I couldn't quite place, but I could feel it in my bones. I had lived through too much to ignore the little signs that something wasn't right. I stood at the edge of the crowd, smiling, laughing, congratulating Jamal and his fiancée, trying not to show the discomfort gnawing at my insides. It had been a long road for me, one that had led me to this point. A proud mother, a devoted stepmother, a woman who had always put others first, only to be forgotten, overshadowed by everything and everyone. I had done it all for them, sacrificed everything. And yet, it seemed like the only thing I ever got in return was the quiet sting of being overlooked. That feeling had become familiar, like an old friend who lingered too long. It had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface, but tonight felt different. I could feel the weight of the years pressing down on me, could feel the questions forming in my heart. Was I ever really seen? Was I ever really loved for who I was? Or had I just been the person to clean up the mess and hold everything together, never expecting anything in return? "Keira, you look beautiful," Calvin said, his smile broad as he approached me. The words stung in their sweetness. I had heard them before, but tonight they felt empty. I had tried so hard to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, to create a home full of love and warmth. Yet here I was, standing at the edge of the celebration, the one person in the room whose presence seemed insignificant. As the night unfolded, I tried to push those feelings aside, but they refused to stay buried. I watched as Calvin made his way to the center of the room, raising his glass to toast. I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't unusual for him to take charge of things like that. What came next, however, I would never forget. He cleared his throat, and with a slight pause that felt too long, he spoke. "I want to make an announcement," Calvin said, his voice not carrying the usual warmth I had come to expect from him. "I've made a decision. I'm moving on from Keira." The room fell quiet, as if someone had pressed a mute button. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My eyes searched Calvin's face, desperate for some sign that this was some kind of cruel joke, but there was nothing. His eyes were cold, almost detached, as though this had been something he had thought about for far too long. "I'm in love with someone else," he continued, his words like daggers. "And I've made arrangements to remove Keira from our home." I could feel the blood drain from my face. The sting of betrayal hit me like a wave, and for a split second, I couldn't understand why I felt so empty. This wasn't the man I had married, the man who had promised to love me until the end of our days. The room around me began to spin, the laughter and chatter now a blur. I looked around at the faces of our family and friends, but their expressions seemed to shift, almost as though they were waiting for me to react. It wasn't pity I saw in their eyes, it was indifference. And then there was Jamal, standing off to the side, his face impassive, his arms crossed. I watched as he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "You heard him, Keira," Jamal said, his tone flat, almost mocking. "You're just not part of the picture anymore. You're not wanted." I couldn't breathe. It felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me, and I was falling into an abyss. My stepson, whom I had raised as my own, had just called me ugly, stripped me of any dignity I had left. The sting of his words was sharp, cutting through every ounce of self-worth I had spent years trying to hold on to. For the first time in my life, I felt completely invisible. But then something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them break me. Not tonight, not ever again. I stood tall, straightening my back, and took a deep breath. My hands trembled slightly, but I held on to the ring on my finger, a symbol of a love I had once believed in. The ring, which had once been a token of commitment and promise, now felt like a weight, but also a reminder. A reminder of who I was. I didn't say anything at first. The silence between us hung heavy, but I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for their compassion. Instead, I lifted my chin and looked at Calvin. "This ring," I said, my voice steady, "says otherwise. It's my truth, not yours." The words echoed in the room, the silence following them like a heavy curtain falling. Calvin looked at me, eyes narrowing, as though trying to decide whether I had lost my mind or if I was somehow right. I could feel the weight of the moment, the shift in the air. The crowd watched, waiting for more, but I didn't need to say anything else. I had spoken my truth, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt seen. The emotions surged within me, hurt, anger, betrayal. But beneath it all, something else stirred, a sense of power, a sense of freedom. I turned and began to walk toward the door, my steps deliberate. I wasn't going to let them keep me here. Not when I had just begun to take control of my life. As I walked out of the venue, the weight of the past seemed to lift, but I knew this was only the beginning. I'm done being invisible. They'll see me now. I sat in the car long after the party had ended, the engine off, but the headlights still dimly lighting the street. The silence around me felt suffocating, as though the world had suddenly grown too big, too loud, too harsh. The words from that night echoed in my mind like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. Ugly. You're not wanted. Calvin's cold declaration replayed in my head on loop, cutting through my thoughts like a blade. It hurt. It really hurt. But beneath that hurt, there was something else. Anger, a quiet fire that had been smoldering for years, suddenly ignited. How could they say such things? How could Calvin, the man I had loved, the man I had given everything for, say that in front of everyone? How could Jamal, my stepson, the boy I had raised like my own, stand there and not say a word in my defense? It felt like the world had turned its back on me in the most brutal way possible. I could feel the tears welling up, but I didn't let them fall. Not now. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to break, to crumble, to beg for their mercy, but that's not who I am. I've always been the strong one, always the one holding things together, keeping the peace, even when it meant swallowing my own pain. But not anymore. Not tonight. They wanted me to break, but they'll see. I'll never be invisible again. I couldn't let this define me. I couldn't let their cruelty define who I was. The woman they saw, someone weak, someone they could walk over, wasn't the woman I had become. I wasn't that person anymore. I had been silenced for too long. But this was my turning point. I wasn't going to wait around for anyone's validation anymore. It was time to fight back. I took a deep breath, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. This was the moment I had been waiting for, though I didn't know it until now. I had spent so many years living for others, burying my own needs, my own desires to keep everyone else happy. But tonight, something snapped. I wasn't going to live in the shadow of their expectations any longer. It wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. But if I didn't take control now, I would spend the rest of my life wondering, what if? The next day, Calvin was still at the house, pretending like nothing had happened, but I couldn't just let it slide. I had to say something. It was time to make my stand. I walked into the living room, where Calvin sat slouched on the couch, flipping through the newspaper. I stood there for a moment, taking in the sight of the man I had shared my life with, the man who had broken me so publicly. "I've given you everything, Calvin," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Everything. And this is how you repay me?" He didn't even look up, his voice dismissive. "Keira, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm moving on. I've already made up my mind." Something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me. It was about my dignity, my self-worth. "I'm done being your doormat," I said, stepping closer. I'm not begging you to stay, Calvin. I'm not asking for anything. But I'll tell you this. I won't let you define me anymore. I decide what happens next. Calvin looked at me then, his eyes narrowing. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than indifference. He didn't know what to say. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned and walked out of the room, the weight of my words settling on my shoulders. It felt like I had finally taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. Later that afternoon, I called Angela. She'd been my friend for years, the one person who always had my back. She didn't judge me. She just listened. "Angela, I don't know what to do," I said when she picked up. "It's like everything's falling apart. I don't even recognize the man I married anymore. And Jamal, I don't even know where to start with him." Angela's voice was steady, reassuring. "Keira, you're stronger than this. You've been the backbone of that family for so long. You've done everything for them, but they don't see you. They never did. It's time you start seeing yourself." Her words hit me harder than I expected. It was true. I had given everything, my love, my time, my energy, and all I had gotten in return was neglect, indifference, and now, outright betrayal. But Angela was right. It was time to stop. "I won't let them break me," I said, a new determination in my voice. "I'm going to fight for me." "That's right, Keira," Angela said. "You deserve better. You've always been worth more than they've ever given you." I could hear the conviction in her voice. It wasn't just empty words. She believed in me, and for the first time in a long while, I started to believe in myself again. That evening, as I sat in my bedroom, I reflected on everything that had happened. It felt like the end of something, but in reality, it was the beginning of a new chapter. I looked at the ring Calvin had given me, the symbol of a love I once thought was real. But now it felt like a weight, a reminder of everything I had allowed myself to become. I reached out and picked it up, holding it in my hand. The cold metal felt heavy, but not in the way it used to. It wasn't a symbol of love anymore. It was a reminder that I deserved better, that I deserved to be seen. I didn't need Calvin's ring to define who I was. I didn't need anyone to validate me. I had spent too many years living for everyone else. I placed the ring on the nightstand, my resolve growing stronger with each passing moment. "It's over. No more pretending," I whispered to myself. "It's time to fight back." The morning after that hellish engagement, I woke up to a strange feeling. It wasn't relief, and it sure as hell wasn't comfort. It was a sharp clarity, a realization that everything that had happened the night before wasn't the end, but a wake-up call. For the first time in ages, I wasn't consumed by what others thought of me. I wasn't suffocated by the expectations I had allowed them to place on me. I was finally seeing myself for who I was, strong, resilient, and worthy of respect. "I've given them my silence for years. Now I'll give them my strength," I reflected silently, feeling the weight of those words settle in my chest. Calvin had thrown his harsh words at me in front of everyone. Jamal had stood there, indifferent, practically cheering on his father's betrayal. I had been reduced to nothing but a shadow in my own home, a woman who had spent decades supporting everyone else, only to be discarded when I was no longer convenient. But no more. No more would I allow myself to be invisible. Later that morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. There was nothing new about me. I still had the same tired eyes and the same gray hairs, but I was different. There was a fire inside me now, burning through the remnants of doubt. I could no longer be the woman who quietly suffered, the one who silently took whatever life, or Calvin, or Jamal handed me. I was done with that life. I knew I had to confront Calvin, but this time, I wouldn't be begging. I wouldn't apologize for things I didn't do. I would stand tall and speak my truth. I found him sitting on the couch, looking as if the night before hadn't even happened. He had a coffee in one hand, flipping through the morning paper with the same casual ease he always had. He didn't even notice me standing there at first. I cleared my throat, and that was all it took to make him look up. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though he knew this wasn't going to be the same quiet Keira he was used to. "Calvin, we need to talk," I said, my voice calm but steady. He scoffed, setting the paper down. What now, Keira? I told you, this is done. I'm moving on. I know what you said, I replied, my words piercing through the silence. But I'm not done. Not yet. His gaze flicked away from me, dismissive, but I wasn't having it. I walked over to where he sat, standing tall, refusing to shrink under his indifferent stare. I've given you everything, Calvin, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. I've spent years of my life supporting you, raising your son, putting my needs on hold so that everyone else could thrive. And for what? To be thrown away like yesterday's trash? Calvin's lips curled into a half smile, the kind that made my blood boil. You should be thankful, Keira. You knew what you were getting into. You always knew. I stepped forward, not flinching. No, Calvin, you were never the one who needed to be thanked. I did everything for you, for this family. I earned my place here, and I don't need your approval anymore. His eyes hardened, but I didn't back down. I wasn't begging. I wasn't going to apologize for taking up space anymore. I've given them my silence for too long. Now, I'll give them my strength, I whispered to myself, just loud enough for him to hear. As the day went on, I found myself reflecting on the years I had spent sacrificing my own dreams, my own identity, for the sake of everyone else. It wasn't just Calvin, it was Jamal, too, who I had raised as my own despite the cold distance between us. It was years of choosing everyone else's happiness over my own, hoping that one day they'd see me for what I truly was, someone who mattered. But as I sat there, alone in my thoughts, the bitterness started to shift. I realized something crucial. My worth had never depended on their approval. It was never about them. It was about me. I had been the silent warrior for too long, but no more. Later, I picked up the phone and dialed Angela's number. She had always been the one person I could count on, the one who saw me for who I was, even when I couldn't see it myself. Angela, I can't take this anymore, I said when she answered. Everything's falling apart. I feel like I'm losing everything. Angela's voice was steady, reassuring. Keira, you're stronger than this. You've always been the backbone of that family. Now it's time for you to be strong for yourself. I let her words sink in. Angela was right. I had spent so long holding everyone else up, making sure they didn't fall apart. But I couldn't keep doing that if it meant I was falling apart in the process. Keira, she continued, it's your turn. You've been putting everyone else first, and it's time you put yourself at the top of that list. Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. For the first time, I saw a way forward. I had been hiding behind my role as the strong one for everyone else, but now it was time to be strong for me. That night, I sat down with a pen and a piece of paper, listing out what I needed to do. I couldn't change the past, but I could take control of my future. It was time to set boundaries. No more letting people walk all over me. No more silence. The first step was clear. I had to confront Calvin, Jamal, and anyone else who thought they could define my worth for me. I wouldn't back down. I wasn't their victim anymore. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The road ahead would be tough. It would take everything I had. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the fight. I was ready. Tomorrow, I would begin again. And I would no longer be invisible. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My heart was racing, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the anticipation of something I had avoided for far too long. It was time. The truth was burning in my chest, and I could no longer hold it in. Calvin had crossed a line I couldn't ignore, and Jamal, my own stepson, had shown me just how little I mattered in their world. It had to end. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them continue walking all over me. I've held my tongue for too long. It's time to let my voice be heard, no matter what, I whispered to myself, the words giving me strength. But the fear lingered. It was the fear of how things would unfold, of the impact it would have on my family, especially on my children. How would they react when I confronted Calvin? How would Jamal respond to me standing up for myself? I wasn't sure, but I couldn't let fear control me anymore. I had to speak my truth. After everything that had happened, I knew the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning, and I was ready for it. The room was silent when I stepped inside. Calvin sat on the couch, his usual smirk replaced with a cold stare, the remnants of last night's indifference still hanging in the air. I could feel the tension between us, thick enough to choke on. This wasn't just another argument, it was the confrontation. The truth needed to be laid out, raw and unapologetic. "Calvin," I began, my voice steady but firm. "We need to talk." He barely looked up from his phone, dismissing me as though my presence didn't matter. That familiar feeling of invisibility crept in, but I shook it off. I wouldn't let him do this to me again. "I'm listening," he muttered, his tone bored. "No, you're not," I replied, walking toward him. "You're hearing me, but you're not listening. What you did yesterday. You humiliated me, in front of everyone. And for what? Because you thought you could just throw me away like a piece of garbage?" Calvin's eyes finally met mine, but there was no apology in them, no regret, just coldness, like he had already made up his mind about everything. "You've been a shadow in this family for years, Keira. You've always been there, but you've never been a priority. I'm moving on, and frankly, I don't owe you anything." I felt the sting of his words, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't the broken woman I had been a day ago. His words didn't have the power they used to. "I've been the one who built this house with my blood and sweat. I gave you everything, but you—" I took a deep breath, the anger rising in my chest. "You've never seen me. Not really. And now, you want to erase me? No, I won't let you." I saw the flicker of frustration in his eyes. He tried to respond, but I cut him off. "You may think I'm just a shadow, but the truth is, I'm the one who made sure this family stayed together. I'm the one who kept it all running. I won't be erased, Calvin. Not now, not ever." He didn't have a response. Instead, he looked away, dismissing me again. But this time, I didn't back down. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally being heard. Later, the confrontation with Calvin left me drained, but a new fire burned inside me. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't pretend I didn't matter anymore. But there was still Jamal, my stepson, the one who had called me ugly the night before. I knew he wouldn't let this go quietly. He was already resentful of me, of the role I played in his life. As I walked back into the house, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, his eyes fixed on his phone. The air between us was heavy, thick with unspoken tension. I didn't want to do this, but I knew it was time. "Jamal," I said, my voice steady. He didn't look up, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him keep disrespecting me. "You've never been a real mother to me, Keira," he spat, his voice filled with venom. "Why should I care about your opinion now?" The words hit harder than I expected, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore, not after everything that had happened. "You've called me ugly, but the truth is, I've been beautiful all along, inside and out," I said, my voice unwavering. "I've earned my place in this family, Jamal, and I won't let you or anyone else make me feel like I don't belong." He stared at me for a moment, his anger bubbling just beneath the surface, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let him tear me down any longer. As the day wore on, I stepped outside, needing a moment of peace. I walked into the backyard, my feet crunching on the gravel path as I looked out at the city. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow across everything, but I felt a sense of distance from it all. The world felt both the same and completely different. I took a deep breath, the weight of everything that had happened finally sinking in. The confrontation with Calvin and Jamal wasn't just a fight for respect. It was the beginning of something new. I had found my voice. I had taken control of my life. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Back inside, I found myself in front of the mirror again. But this time, I saw a different woman. She was stronger, more confident. She wasn't the one who let others define her anymore. She had a future to build, one that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. The door behind me creaked open, and I heard Calvin's footsteps approaching. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. "I've done what you never thought I could do, Calvin," I whispered to myself. I found my strength. As I walked away from the mirror, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to walk. "This is just the beginning," I thought as I stood tall in the doorway. I'm not going to wait for anyone to give me permission to be me. I've already taken back what's mine. I stood there, looking at myself in the mirror. A part of me barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was older, marked by years of sacrifice and heartache. But her eyes were different now. They weren't the same eyes that used to stare back at me, full of doubts and pain. Today, there was something else. Something I hadn't seen in a long time. Strength. I'd come a long way from the woman who would let Calvin's dismissive glances and Jamal's cruel words eat away at her. Today, I felt like I could breathe again. I've fought for so long, now I need to fight for me, I whispered under my breath. It was time to put myself first. Time to stop allowing people to walk all over me, to silence my voice, to diminish my worth. I had spent so much of my life trying to please everyone else that I had forgotten how to live for myself. Looking back, I could hardly recognize the woman I once was, always hidden behind the veil of family duties, always waiting for someone to notice me. But now, I was different. I was not that woman anymore. I've found my voice, I thought, and I'm not going to lose it again. The next few days were hard. Every confrontation, every pushback, felt like I was taking a step further into the unknown. But that's how it had always been for me, living my life in the shadows. And now, I was walking in the light, and it felt damn good. It wasn't long before Jamal started acting up again. His resentment boiled over the minute he saw me standing my ground. The more confident I became, the more threatened he felt. He didn't like this new version of me. He couldn't control it. "You think you can just turn this around after all these years?" he snapped one evening when I called him out on something he'd done. His words stung like a slap, and for a moment, I felt my chest tighten. But I held firm. "Don't talk to me like that, Jamal," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've never really seen me. I'm not some side character in this family anymore. I've earned my place, and I'll be respected." He scoffed, rolling his eyes. "You're acting like we all owe you something." I stood up straight. "No, you owe me nothing, but you will respect me, you'll see me, and I won't let you belittle me anymore." The tension in the room was thick, but I didn't back down. He wasn't going to see me as weak again. Calvin was another story. He was still dismissive, still convinced that nothing had changed, but I wasn't going to allow him to dismiss me any longer. I'd already given him enough of my life, enough of my soul. Now, it was time for him to see who I really was. I had a conversation with him one evening, after the kids were asleep. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no turning back. "I gave my all for this family," I said calmly, "and I will no longer allow anyone to degrade me. You might not see it, but I've been holding everything together, and I won't let you erase me." He just looked at me, that same cold look in his eyes. He didn't say anything for a long time, but I didn't need him to. I knew that I had spoken my truth, and no matter how he reacted, it wouldn't change what was inside of me now. I was standing tall, and I was not going to shrink anymore. Later that night, after everything had settled, I sat down and reflected on everything that had transpired. I'd been through so much, had carried so much weight for so long. But I was finally starting to feel the relief. A part of me had been buried under years of emotional turmoil, and I was starting to unearth it, piece by piece. I've spent so much of my life worried about what others think, I thought to myself. No more. I'll define myself on my own terms. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I didn't need their approval. I had spent too much of my life trying to please others, trying to make everyone else happy, but it had never been enough. And now I realized that I was enough, just as I was. I took a few days for myself, away from the noise and chaos of my family. In those moments of solitude, I started to find my emotional peace again. It was hard, but it was necessary. I had to heal. My wounds didn't just disappear, they had to be tended to, and I was the only one who could do it. I found myself making small changes. I'd take walks, spend time with my thoughts, and rediscover little things that brought me peace. I started to cook for myself, something I hadn't done in years. I remembered what it felt like to take care of me, to put myself first. It was a slow process, but I was healing. My relationship with Jamal wasn't perfect, and I knew that it wouldn't be. But I realized that I couldn't control how he felt. I could only control how I responded. And I was learning to respond with dignity, not with defensiveness. We were never going to see eye to eye, but I wasn't going to let him continue to tear me down. I was learning to protect myself, to set boundaries where I had none before. One afternoon, I sat down with him, ready to talk. I didn't expect everything to change in a single conversation, but I was ready to begin the process. I don't expect you to agree with everything I do, Jamal, I said, but I want you to understand why I've made the choices I've made. I've always put this family first, but now I have to put me first. He listened, but there was still resistance. That was okay. I was no longer looking for approval. I was looking for respect. Later that evening, I felt a quiet sense of peace. Everything around me felt like it was beginning to settle. The storm wasn't over yet, but the winds had calmed. I was standing firm in my new strength. This is my life now, I said to myself, looking out at the sunset, and I'm going to live it for me. I had found the courage to stand strong. I had reclaimed my voice, and nothing could take that away from me. As I walked into the next day, I knew that I had only just begun. There would be more obstacles, more challenges, but nothing would stop me now. I was done waiting for permission to be myself. I had already taken control. They'll never see me as weak again, I thought, looking ahead. I'll show them who I am, and they'll have to respect me. The weight of what I had to do hit me like a freight train. I wasn't ready for this. Not the ultimatum, not the confrontation that was inevitable. But here I was, summoned by the family, sitting in that cold, quiet room, waiting for the storm to come. I could feel the tension building, thick enough to choke me if I let it. Jamal, Calvin, the kids, all of them sitting around, waiting for me to fall in line, to apologize for standing up for myself. You're either part of this family, or you're out. Jamal's voice cut through the air. No more playing the victim. I could feel my heart racing, but I didn't let it show. Not this time. I wasn't that woman anymore. The woman who took the punches, who stayed quiet, who hid in the shadows. No, I was done with that. The fear of rejection, of not being accepted by the family, no longer had the same hold over me. I'm done with being scared of their rejection. It's time I step up for myself no matter the cost, I thought. With a calm resolve, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep pretending that things were fine, that I was fine, just to make everyone else comfortable. This was it. I was going to face the truth, and I was going to do it with my head held high. The room felt colder as Calvin walked in. His presence alone felt like a weight pressing down on me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cower anymore. You know, Keira, I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this, Calvin began, his voice flat, dismissive. I've done everything for you, and now you're turning your back on me? On us? I stared at him, feeling the anger rise within me. It wasn't the anger of the past, the kind that kept me silent, kept me second-guessing myself. This was different. This was the anger of someone who had been walked on for too long and was finally standing up for herself. You think you've done everything for me? I asked, my voice steady. No, Calvin. You haven't done a damn thing for me. I sacrificed everything for this family. I gave up my time, my energy, my life. I supported you when no one else did. And now you want to act like I'm the problem? I shook my head, disbelief filling my chest. I didn't sacrifice everything to be your punching bag. I sacrificed because I loved this family. But you need to hear me now. I am not invisible anymore. He didn't say anything at first. I could see it in his eyes, the disbelief that I wasn't backing down. He tried to manipulate the situation, tried to gaslight me into feeling guilty. You should be grateful for what I've done, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I've given you a life. You wouldn't have what you have if it weren't for me. Grateful? I scoffed. For what? For making me invisible? For treating me like I'm not worthy of your respect? No, Calvin. I'm done being grateful for crumbs. I'm done with you and your manipulation. The silence that followed was deafening, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of victory. The conversation didn't end with Calvin. Jamal was next, and he wasn't about to let me walk away unscathed. You think you can just come in here and rewrite the rules? Jamal's voice was sharp, his anger burning through every word. No, you're still just the outsider in this family. His words cut through me like a knife. For a moment, I felt the familiar sting of rejection, the feeling of not being good enough, not being loved enough, not being seen. It hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't let it consume me. I stood tall, holding my ground. You don't get to define me anymore, Jamal. I don't need your approval, and I don't need your acceptance. I've spent my whole life trying to make peace with you, trying to make everyone happy, but not anymore. You've called me ugly. But the truth is, I've been beautiful all along, inside and out. Jamal stood there, his face twisted with disbelief, but I wasn't done. You think you can tear me down with your words? You can't. I've heard it all before, and I've kept silent, but no more. I've earned my place in this family, and I'm not going anywhere. He was speechless, but I wasn't done yet. I was finally seeing the truth for what it was. I had been letting these people define me for too long, and I wasn't going to let it happen anymore. I stepped outside, needing to catch my breath. The air felt different now, heavier somehow, but also lighter. I had said my piece, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. I could feel the weight of my past, of all the years of mistreatment and silence, starting to lift off of me. This is my life now, I thought. I'm not asking for their approval anymore. I'm living for me now. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to lose it. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was prepared. I had already faced the hardest part, the truth, and nothing could take that away from me. Just as I thought the worst was behind me, a voice from the shadows spoke up. My sister, who had always been quiet, always passive, stepped forward. I've been watching you, Keira, she said softly, and I've been hurting too. All these years, I've kept quiet, just like you did, but I can't stay silent anymore. You're not alone. Her words hit me like a wave, crashing over me with a force I hadn't expected. I stared at her, surprised, shocked even, that someone in my family, someone who had never stood up for me before, was speaking out for me now. This was the turning point I needed. I looked at my sister, finally seeing her as more than just a bystander in my life. I was no longer fighting this battle alone, and for the first time, I felt the power of unity. I'm not asking for their approval anymore, I whispered to myself, my voice steady. I'm living for me now. I was ready. I was done living for them. I was going to live for me, for my own peace. I'm leaving for now, I told my family. I need to find myself, away from this dysfunction, but I'll be back when I'm ready. I walked away from the confrontation feeling like I had won, but also unsure of what lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but I was stronger than I had ever been. This is just the beginning of my journey, I thought, looking ahead with new determination. I've taken control of my own life, and nothing is going to stop me now. I stood in front of the family gathering, my heart beating in my chest like a drum. The room was heavy with anticipation. I had walked away before, needing space to find myself, to heal, and now here I was, walking back into the lion's den. I had no intention of begging for their approval, no intention of being their shadow anymore. This wasn't about them accepting me, it was about me accepting myself. I had been through too much, let down too many times, and silenced for far too long. But no more. I wasn't the woman who would bend and break, not anymore. This time, I was reclaiming everything I had lost, starting with my voice. I'm not the person I was before, I whispered to myself as I walked through the door, meeting their expectant stares. I've made peace with who I am, and now it's time for them to do the same. The room shifted as I entered, eyes narrowing, others unsure how to react. Some looked hopeful. Perhaps they thought I'd come back, ready to bow to the pressure. Others looked resentful, their disdain radiating from their faces. Calvin didn't even bother to mask his disgust. You think you can just show up and fix everything? Calvin spat, his voice filled with the venom I had come to expect. It's not that easy, Keira. This is family, not some charity you can walk in and out of when it suits you. His words stung, but they didn't have the same power over me they once did. I wasn't here for him, or for Jamal, or for anyone else who thought they could walk over me. I wasn't here to fix them, or their perceptions of me. I was here to fix myself. I'm not doing this for you, Calvin, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm doing it for me. The room went silent. I could feel the weight of their expectations, but it didn't matter anymore. They could think whatever they wanted. The confrontation was inevitable. Calvin and Jamal, with all their anger and pride, thought they could break me again, but they didn't know who they were dealing with anymore. I didn't ask for your approval, but I did deserve your respect, I began, letting my words hang in the air like a sharp-edged blade. And I'm not waiting for it anymore. Calvin's face twisted in irritation. He couldn't manipulate me like he used to. He tried to shut me down, to turn this into one of those fights where I'd shrink, where I'd back down and apologize, but I wouldn't. Not this time. I've been silent for too long, I continued, and I won't let you silence me anymore. Jamal wasn't any better. If anything, his hostility had only grown in my absence. As I stood my ground, he tried to break me down. You think you can just come in here and rewrite the rules? He said, voice laced with bitterness. You're still just the outsider. You've always been. His words stung. The truth always hurt, and there was some truth in what he said. But I was no longer the outsider he thought I was. I was the one who had given everything to this family, and I would no longer let anyone minimize that. You can call me whatever you want, Jamal, I said, my voice unwavering. But I'm done with the lies. I've earned my place in this family, and you don't get to take that from me. Jamal's eyes flared, but I could see the cracks in his armor. He wasn't as sure of himself as he let on. That was the difference now. I wasn't afraid to speak my truth, even if it made him uncomfortable. As the confrontation reached its peak, I could feel myself beginning to crack under the weight of it all. The years of pain, of feeling invisible, came rushing back, but I wasn't going to collapse. Not now. I wouldn't let them see that kind of weakness. For a moment, I felt everything I had buried deep inside me start to surface. The anger, the sadness, the regret. It all came crashing down, threatening to swallow me whole. But then, in the midst of it all, I found my footing again. I had spent too long letting them dictate who I was. That was over now. I am not the same person you once knew, I declared, my voice steady, the tears threatening but not falling. You can either accept the new me, or you can lose me forever. But either way, I will stand tall. Just when I thought the confrontation was over, someone I never expected stepped forward. My sister, quiet and always reserved, looked at me with something new in her eyes. Support. I've been watching you, Keira, she said softly, breaking the tension in the room. And I've been hurting too. All these years I stayed quiet, but no more. I'm not going to let you do this alone. Her words hit me like a thunderclap. For years, I thought I was the only one suffering, the only one bearing the weight of this family's dysfunction. But here she was, stepping up for me, finally showing me that I wasn't alone. It was a turning point. Suddenly, the world didn't feel so heavy. I wasn't the only one who had been hurt. I wasn't the only one trying to survive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. With my sister's support, I found the strength to make the hardest decision of my life. I was leaving. Not for good, but for now. I needed to find my peace. I needed to rediscover myself, away from the toxicity that had held me captive for too long. I'm leaving for now, I said, standing up straighter than I had in years. But I'll be back when I'm ready. I need to find myself first. I walked away, my mind buzzing with 1,000 thoughts. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. I had faced my family, my past, and the ghosts that had haunted me for so long. But even though I felt stronger than I had in years, I knew that the future was still uncertain. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: I would never let anyone hold me back again. This is just the beginning of my journey, I thought. I've taken control of my own life, and nothing is going to stop me now. I could feel the tension in the air long before I walked into the room. My hands clenched into fists at my sides as I stood outside the door, taking a deep breath. The past few weeks had been a journey of reflection, growth, and painful realizations. I wasn't the same woman who had walked out months ago. No, this time, I wasn't returning to beg for anything. I wasn't here for anyone's approval. I was here for me. I've given them enough chances to see me, I thought to myself as I stood tall, gathering every ounce of strength I had left. I've been silent for too long, but I am done with silence now. It felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Family members looked at me as I entered, some cautiously hopeful, others with simmering resentment. Calvin, Jamal, and the rest of them could feel it, the weight of the situation, the reckoning that had been building for so long. I took my place in the room, no longer burdened by the weight of family expectations. I was no longer the person they could walk all over. This moment was mine, and I wasn't going to shrink from it. Not now, not ever again. Calvin was the first to speak. His voice was sharp, laced with bitterness. "What do you want now, Keira? You've been gone, and now you think you can just come back like everything's fine?" I met his gaze, steady and unwavering. He thought he still had power over me, that he could control the narrative of my life like he always had. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't going to cower in front of him. "You've made it clear how little you think of me," I said, my voice calm, but full of the anger I'd been holding back for years. "But I've given you enough chances. This is not about what you want or what you think you deserve. It's about me reclaiming what I've always deserved." Calvin scoffed, trying to undermine me again. But instead of backing down like I used to, I stood my ground. "You thought I was weak because I kept quiet. But silence is a strength, not a surrender." The room was split now, the air charged with the tension of 1,000 unspoken words. Jamal, looking more uncomfortable than ever, tried to step in, but he wasn't any better than Calvin. His attempts to mediate only made things worse. "You're acting like this is some big betrayal, Keira," Jamal said, clearly underestimating the gravity of what I had been through. "Why can't you just let it go? We're family. Let it go." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let him see it. Instead, I looked him in the eye and spoke the truth he didn't want to hear. "I'm not here to beg for forgiveness. I'm here to reclaim what's mine, my voice, my peace, and my dignity." Jamal's face twisted with frustration. "You don't understand," he spat. "You've made it impossible for us to move forward." "Well, maybe it's because I've been trying to move forward while you've kept me stuck in the past," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I'm done being stuck." Calvin, seeing his hold on the family slipping, resorted to his final attempt, attacking me on a personal level. He dug into my past mistakes, tried to tear me down by bringing up my flaws, the parts of me that I had spent years regretting. But his words no longer had power over me. I had long since come to terms with my past. Those mistakes were mine to own, and they didn't define me anymore. "You can call me ugly," I said, my voice unwavering, "but you can't call me weak anymore. I've built my own strength from the ground up." The confrontation reached its tipping point, and I could feel the emotional weight pushing against me, threatening to crush me under its burden. Calvin's insults, Jamal's dismissiveness, they didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the same woman who had once been afraid of their rejection. "I'm done," I declared, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm done being part of this toxic family dynamic. I'm done letting you define me." Some family members were shocked into silence. Others, particularly Jamal, tried to convince me to stay, to give them one more chance. But I knew the truth now. I couldn't keep walking in circles, pretending to be a part of something that would never change. "You want me to stay," I said, my voice firm, "but you won't let me thrive. It's time to go, for my peace and my future." With that, I turned and walked away. But this wasn't just about leaving. It was about finding myself again, free from the shackles of this family's judgment. For the first time in years, I felt liberated. "I'm not leaving because I'm weak," I thought. a new sense of strength coursing through me. I'm leaving because I've found the strength to live for myself. As I walked out the door, I realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. I had taken control of my life, and nothing would stand in my way now. The real journey starts now, I whispered to myself, and I'm ready to walk it alone if necessary. As I left, part of me couldn't help but wonder if I had done the right thing. The future was still uncertain, but I knew I could handle whatever came next. For the first time in my life, I was living for me. I've made my decision, I thought, but I can't help but wonder, will they ever see me as I am now? Or am I truly alone in this world? The next chapter of my life was yet to be written, but one thing was certain. I was going to write it on my terms. I've come a long way. I've fought battles that no one saw, carried burdens that weren't mine, and allowed myself to be shaped by the weight of others' expectations. But now, as I stand here looking back, I know one thing. I'm not that woman anymore. For years I played small. I let them decide my worth, my place in their world. But today, it's different. I'm deciding for myself. I've made peace with my past, and in doing so, I've reclaimed my power. The woman I am now is someone who is whole, not defined by the roles others forced upon me. I used to think that my worth came from their validation, but I've learned that it comes from within. I am my own validation. I stand here today, stronger than I've ever been, not because of what others think of me, but because I finally know who I am. The scars I carry are not signs of weakness, they are proof of my resilience. The silence I once endured wasn't submission, it was survival. And now, it's my strength. It's not easy, though. I know that even though I've moved beyond the past, there will be challenges ahead. The world outside my family is still full of obstacles, but I'm ready for them. I've faced my demons, and now it's time to step forward. The next phase of my life starts here. Stepping away from the family was the hardest decision I've ever made. I used to fear loneliness, but now it feels different. It's not the loneliness of rejection. It's the quiet that comes with freedom. For the first time in years, I don't have to answer to anyone. I'm no longer trying to earn love or acceptance. I'm simply living for myself. The transition hasn't been easy. There are moments when I catch myself missing the familiarity of the chaos, the noise, the demands, but each time I remind myself, this is the peace I fought for. I'm building a life where I am in control, and that's something I've never had before. I find myself rediscovering passions I had long forgotten. I take long walks in the evenings, something I never had the time to do before. I read books that have been collecting dust on my shelf for years. For the first time in a long time, I'm doing things for me, things that make me feel whole again. Outside my family, people have begun to notice the change. Some are surprised, some are impressed, and some are simply curious. But most importantly, there are people who support me. They see the woman I've become, not the woman I was. And for the first time in a long time, I feel seen. It's been a while since I stepped back into the social scene. I've avoided it for so long, hiding behind the walls of my family's dysfunction. But now, I'm slowly reintroducing myself to the world. I've started reconnecting with old friends, and the unfamiliarity of it all is both exciting and terrifying. Some people don't understand. They remember the quiet, submissive woman I used to be, the one who always said yes, always put everyone else first. And now they see this new version of me, strong, confident, unapologetic. They don't know how to react. Some question my motives, others are unsure of the new Keira. But instead of retreating, I stand my ground. I challenge their preconceptions, showing them that I'm not who they think I am. With every interaction, I become more certain of who I've become. I allow myself to be vulnerable when needed, sharing my story, my journey, and the strength I've found in reclaiming my life. And in doing so, I build new, healthier relationships based on mutual respect. For the first time, I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm not hiding behind old habits or trying to please anyone. I'm simply being myself, and it feels damn good. It hasn't been easy, but the healing process is well underway. I'm rediscovering my own dreams, the ones I buried for so long. I'm reconnecting with the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. And yes, there are moments when I revisit old wounds, but instead of running from them, I face them head on, allowing myself to feel the pain and work through it. For years, I blamed myself for the way I let my family treat me, but now I know that I wasn't the problem. I wasn't weak. I was simply doing the best I could with what I had. And now, I forgive myself for allowing that to continue for so long. I'm no longer defined by their expectations. I'm seeing the woman I always was, the woman I buried under layers of shame and guilt. I see her now, strong, resilient, and worthy of every good thing that comes her way. Now that I've moved beyond the past, I'm ready to step into the future. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I'm not afraid anymore. I've learned to trust myself, to follow my instincts, and to make bold decisions. Whether it's pursuing a new career, moving to a new city, or simply finding peace within myself, I know I'm on the right path. And I'm not doing it alone. I've become a source of strength and inspiration for others, particularly those who have felt as trapped as I once did. I mentor younger women, sharing my story, showing them that they too can reclaim their lives. It's my way of paying it forward. This is not the end, I tell myself. This is just the beginning of the life I was always meant to live, and no one, not even my past, will take that away from me. As I close this chapter of my life, I can't help but reflect on how far I've come. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I feel more confident than ever. I've walked away from the family that held me down. But now, as I step into the unknown, I wonder what the world will hold for me. Will they see me as I am now, or will I have to fight harder than ever to be seen for who I truly am? I've made it this far, I think, but now the real battle begins. What's next?